GTA all-time gangs tier list. Let's go. Los Santos Triads. I gotta say, the Triads are an intimidating bunch. These guys don't mess around. From their snazzy suits to the fact that they roll deep, they just ooze an aura of menace and discipline. You can tell right away they're organized and well-connected. Definitely not the type of crew you want to get on the wrong side of. In terms of their operations, the Triads have their fingers in all sorts of illicit pies. Drugs, extortion, gun running, you name it. But what I respect is that they're not just mindless thugs. There's a code they follow, customs and traditions from the old country. It's a way of life for them, not just a criminal enterprise. When it comes to combatability, these dudes are straight killers. Highly trained, patient, and utterly ruthless when they need to be. I wouldn't want to face down a squad of them empty-handed, that's for sure. So taking all that into account, I'm giving the Los Santos Triads a solid A-tier rating. They're vicious, calculating, and have serious resources behind them. Not quite an S-tier threat like the Ballas or families, but definitely near the top of the food chain. You don't want to find yourself in their crosshairs, trust me on that. Mayweather Security. From the moment you see one of their trucks roll up, you know you're dealing with serious professional muscle. The operatives are decked out in military-grade gear, moving with precision and deadly intent. It's like a friggin' private army at the beck and call of the ultra-rich elite. I gotta respect their training and discipline, though. These dudes are ex-military special forces types who obviously went through one hell of a selection process. The way they operate with those hand signals and coordinated stacks, you can tell their tactics are on point. Of course, that intense skill set is precisely what makes them so dangerous. Mayweather doesn't mess around. If you're deemed a threat to their clients' interests, they will neutralize you with extreme prejudice. No negotiations, no mercy. Just well-oiled, systematic elimination. Facing them in a straight-up firefight would be absolute suicide, unless you had overwhelming numbers and firepower. So with all that in mind, I'm giving Mayweather an S-tier rating as one of the most powerful forces in Los Santos. Only the most powerful criminal organizations or corrupt government elements could possibly stand up against these guys. But what do you all think? Could even an S-tier gang take down Mayweather's professional operators? Let me know your thoughts on how they rank below. The Vagos. Right off the bat, I gotta say the Vagos have a pretty iconic look with their green bandanas and leather vests covered in crude tats and biker insignia. Definitely gives off a menacing ID gaff vibe that fits their ruthless reputation. In terms of their operations, the Vagos are into all the usual roughneck activities. Drug running, gun trafficking, extortion, that kind of thing. But what really sets them apart is their military-level organization and firepower. I'm talking heavy weaponry, folks. Automatic rifles, RPGs, even the occasional attack chopper. You can tell these guys don't just aspire to be small-time street punks. They've got far more serious ambitions of controlling entire neighborhoods through sheer force. Despite having a decent numbers advantage in most areas, the Vagos are nothing to sneeze at in combat either. Each member is a certified OG who's put in plenty of work over the years. They fight with a reckless, unrelenting savagery that makes them incredibly hostile terrain. So factoring in their weaponry, brutality, wide territory, and ridiculously high propensity for violence, I'm giving the Vagos gang an A-tier rating. Not quite at the level of the city's biggest heavyweights, but they're definitely a powerhouse in their own right that you wouldn't want to mess with unless you came very correct. Marabunta. From the moment you see their bright yellow outfits and aggressive face tattoos, you know you're dealing with some of the most unhinged psychos the city has to offer. Just being in their presence makes you feel like you're getting stared down by a pack of rabid dogs. Unlike a lot of posers, the Marabunta's crazy reputation is 100% earned too. We're talking about textbook sociopaths here who were born and bred for nothing but violence and mayhem on the streets. Showing any kind of weakness is like ringing a dinner bell for these psychos. In a straight-up fight, they are absolutely relentless and fearless, like they have no concept of self-preservation. The Marabunta will just keep coming at you in that terrifying swarm until you're completely overwhelmed and beaten down. It's that utter disregard for their own lives that makes them so brutal to deal with. Now, the Grove Street families. Right off the bat, Grove Street earns mad respect just for their longevity and unbreakable sense of hood pride. We're talking a multi-generational crew that's been putting it down for their neighborhood harder than anybody for decades upon decades. What makes the families so formidable is their incredible depth of manpower, and shooters who will quite literally go to war over Grove Street territory. Any conflict with them is guaranteed to turn into a massive feet-on-the-street situation with a ridiculous show of force. At the same time, The GSF aren't just a bunch of mindless bangers causing chaos. There's a hierarchical structure and OG veteran leadership ensuring a level of strategy, discipline, and coordination that most gangs can't match. That said, their Achilles heel has always been the endless cycle of set tripping and infighting between different subsets of the gang. The bickering and disloyalty enables their biggest rivals to make moves and encroach on their turf when they should be a unified front. Still, even with that caveat, you can never sleep on Grove Street's skills on the guerrilla warfare front. These cats know every inch of the streets and alleyways, every trick in the book for hitting hard and fading away into the shadows before the enemies can retaliate. I gotta put the Grove Street families at a well-deserved A-tier, borderline S-tier ranking. Only the absolute heaviest hitters in Los Santos can really fuck with them on their own turf. Southside Hoods. For the Southside Hoods, I'm giving them a C-tier rating. These guys are definitely a scrappy neighborhood crew, but they're pretty small time compared to the bigger players. From what I've seen, the Southside Hoods are basically just a disorganized posse of young bucks looking to put in work on the streets and get stripes. They're into the usual gang banging, petty crimes, low-level drug slinging, that type of stuff. Nothing too sophisticated or large-scale. Their biggest advantage is having strength in numbers in their little pocket of turf down south. If you roll through their territory, they'll swarm you and try to overwhelm with bodies. But in any kind of straight-up gunfight against serious heat, these dudes get outmatched quickly. The lack of structure, discipline, and seasoned leadership in the Southside ranks holds them back big time. It's a lot of amateur-hour energy without any real strategy or long-term game plan to make serious power moves. They're a nuisance, but not a major threat to the city's heaviest crews. So yeah, that's why I'm leveling them at C tier. Spanish Lords. Now, the Spanish Lords, on the other hand, I'd place a full tier higher as a borderline B tier group based on their strengths. What makes the Lords a bit more formidable is their relatively organized structure as an OG Hispanic gang with legit leadership calling the shots. They're not just a bunch of scattered randoms like some of the smaller sets. The Lords also have enough veterano shooters with experience to sort of hold their own against adversaries of similar weight class. They're not pushovers by any stretch, and can put up a fairly OP opposition if you take them for a joke. With all that said, I can't really put them any higher than a B tier, because the Spanish Lords still don't have that level of discipline, leadership, or firepower to be considered elite. They're viable players for sure, but get outmatched by the city's biggest heavyweights, Ancelotti Crime Family. For the Ancelotti Clan, I'm giving them a solid B tier rating. You can tell the Ancelottis are deeply entrenched in all sorts of high-level racketeering and criminal enterprises. What separates them from a lot of gangs is their extremely organized hierarchical structure and strict adherence to old-school Cosa Nostra codes of conduct. There's a chain of command, made men, protocol, the whole 9 yards with these guys. That discipline, combined with their massive pool of resources and high-ranking connections, makes the Ancelottis an incredibly powerful adversary to have to deal with. They can bring serious legal firepower and muscle to any situation. At the same time, I can't quite put them at that elite A or S tier level because, at the end of the day, they still have to answer to bigger outfits back in Liberty City, and the East Coast families call the real shots for organized crime nationwide. Now, on the other hand, the Gambetti family is a prime example of a D-tier joke of an organization that's pretty much a non-factor. From everything I've heard, the Gambettis used to be a more relevant crime syndicate in their heyday. But years of incompetence, infighting, and arrogance have left them as a broke, toothless shell of their former selves. These days, the so-called family is just a couple of old-timers desperately trying to maintain some aura of respect, but with zero real muscle, connections, or income streams to back it up. Any fear the Gambetti name once commanded has totally evaporated. Their entire operation is basically nickel-and-dime shakedowns of mom-and-pop businesses in some rinky-dink neighborhood. Maybe a little fencing operation for stolen goods here and there. But that's about as high as their criminal ambitions can reach at this point. In terms of combat ability, frankly, most street gangs could wipe the floor with whatever remaining Gambetti button men might be left. We're talking total has-beens without the numbers, weapons, or skill to be taken even remotely seriously anymore. So yeah, the Gambetti family is about as D-tier as it gets, a hollowed-out husk of irrelevance that poses zero threat. They're only still around because literally nobody bothers wasting time exterminating what little is left of their sad, pathetic remnants. The Leon family. The Leon crime family is one outfit you definitely don't want to underestimate in this city. I'm giving them a solid A-tier ranking as a premier syndicate. What immediately sticks out about the Leonis is their pedigree and deep roots in the American-Italian Cosa Nostra dating back generations. We're talking about a truly patrician mob family with lineages tracing back to the old neighborhoods of Liberty City and even Sicily itself. Because of that incredibly long criminal legacy, the Leonis have achieved a rare kind of nationwide reach and embedment in various sectors that's pretty much unmatched. Whether it's construction, labor unions, trucking, you name it, they've painstakingly infiltrated and corrupted those industries over decades. What also makes this family so formidable is their adherence to strict, traditional mafia protocols of conduct. There's an intense reverence for familia, codes of honor, respect for structure, and earning your bones through our thing. It imbues the whole organization with a real disciplined aura of menace. And despite being an old-school outfit, make no mistake, the Leonis are still highly dangerous and capable of bringing incredible violence to bear. From what I hear, their made men and muscle are absolutely no joke when it comes to gunplay and ensuring total obedience to the administration. The only factor keeping me from putting the Leons at that elusive S-tier level is their apparent penchant for infighting and burning serious resources on internal conflicts and power struggles over the years. It's been their main Achilles heel in terms of reaching their full potential domination. But that's really just splitting hairs at the highest level. At the end of the day, the Leon crime family remains one of the single most powerful, wealthy, and deeply rooted criminal forces in America, with a chokehold over entire sectors of the economy. Ballas. When it comes to the big dog gangs ruling the streets of Los Santos, you can't get much more infamous than the Ballas. These dudes are definitely S-tier public enemy #1 material. From the second you see that signature purple rag, you know you're dealing with some of the most cold-blooded, uncompromising gangstas the city has to offer. The Ballas were born and bred from the squalor of the streets with a singular goal: put in work by any means necessary. What makes them so dangerous is their borderline military-level organization and discipline across all fronts of the gang. We're talking intricate hierarchies, strategic territories, communication structures, the whole 9 yards of a straight-up criminal army. On the combat side, Ballas don't play games. They have an absolutely deep arsenal of firepower ranging from shotties and automatics all the way up to bigger, anti-vehicle/bunker-busting hardware. Their high-level training also allows them to move and shoot with terrifying coordination. But what really sets Ballas apart is their unrelenting ambition to be #1 at all costs, even if it means taking scorched earth tactics. They will flood zones with overwhelming manpower, weaponry, and sheer tenacity to crush any resistance or opposition by any means necessary. Suffice to say, having the Ballas as an enemy is a scary proposition for even the heaviest hitters in Los Santos. They are the embodiment of remorseless, calculated urban warfare, and should be avoided at all costs if possible. Definitely an S-tier menace. Diablos. In stark contrast to the Ballas' ferocity, I'd put their rival gang, the Diablos, at maybe a C-tier level, just a moderate threat overall. To their credit, the Diablos undeniably have a strong presence and solid rep in certain pockets of the city's underworld. They move serious weight when it comes to drugs, extortion rackets, that kind of thing, so they can't be completely slept on from an income standpoint. Where the Diablos fall short, though, is that next level of true militant organization, training, and resources that puts them over the top. At the end of the day, they're just a fairly disjointed gang without the cohesion, reinforced manpower, or higher-level connections of the big boys. In an open battlefield, the Diablos rely more on throwing superior numbers and offense at a problem, rather than disciplined small-unit tactics. They'll just try to overwhelm through sheer aggression versus truly outmaneuvering adversaries skillfully. So while they can certainly make a lot of noise and put up a mean street fight from time to time, the Diablos just don't have that sustainable model or capabilities to be considered an enduring force to be reckoned with across Los Santos. They're more of a localized nuisance to whatever hood they're operating out of. The Lost MC. For the Lost Biker Gang, I'd put them at a solid B-tier ranking. These guys may look like just a rowdy crew of misfits, but they're not to be trifled with. The Lost have a big advantage in their pure numbers and ability to mobilize a small army of roughneck bikers at a moment's notice. When they roll deep, it's an incredibly intimidating display of brawny force. More than just aimless outlaws, though, the Lost are legitimate players in the gun-running and drug trafficking games. Their patched operations give them a widespread network perfect for smuggling and distribution across the American Southwest. The Lost don't get bogged down in any kind of convoluted motives or codes. They're basically pure chaotic evil down for any degree of mayhem and depravity. It makes them extremely unpredictable adversaries. The main thing keeping the Lost out of A or S tier is their lack of overarching structure, discipline, and advanced tactical capabilities. Cartel Madrazo. Now the Cartel Madrazo, on the other hand, I'd put them at a very healthy A-tier threat level, borderline S-tier even. We're talking serious heavyweight Mexican outlaws here. From everything I've gathered, the Madrazo reach extends across vast swaths of San Andreas and borderlands as a premier trafficking cartel for narcotics and humans. Their steadily growing power and complete aura of violence preceded them. What makes Madrazo so terrifying is their extreme propensity for utterly ruthless, almost vindictive viciousness against anyone who falls into disfavor. We're talking beheadings, brutalities, just a scorched earth campaign of cruelty to solidify dominance. On top of that, cartel funds give them access to an incredible arsenal. Armored vehicles, heavy weaponry, you name it. Their soldiers are also highly trained mercenary types, not just street thugs, extremely skilled at paramilitary ops. The one factor keeping me from putting Madrazo at that ultimate S tier is their overhead being Joaquin cartel leadership still operating from Mexico. So while incredibly powerful across the San Andreas region, they don't have total autonomous control. But that's just splitting hairs, honestly. The Cartel Madrazo are as powerful and merciless as criminal militias come in this part of the world. You simply do not want to end up on their hit list whatsoever if you can avoid it. The McReary family. In contrast to the Madrazos, I'd put the McReary Irish mob family at maybe a C-tier level as a more mid-level. Now don't get me wrong, the McReary name still carries a certain feared reputation stemming from their heritage of brutal, uncompromising values and code of violence. These aren't guys you want to take lightly by any stretch. From what I can gather though, their current operations are pretty small potatoes, mostly centered around running Irish-American gambling, smuggling, and extortion rackets. The McRearys are also notably lacking in significant manpower reserves or serious modern firepower compared to the bigger syndicate players. It's a very old-school, analog Irish mob mentality that struggles to keep up with more evolved criminal enterprises. So while the family is still capable of bringing plenty of physicality and pugnacious attitude to any given situation, they just don't have that true scale, reach, or resources to be considered a supreme power on the level of cartels or top-tier outfits. And here's the final tier list. What changes would you make? Don't forget to let me know in the comments. And please subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you won't regret. I'll see you in the next one.